Imagine walking along a quiet Australian beach and discovering a man whose silence has echoed through decades. This was the Somerton Man, found in 1948, with all identifying markers removed, his identity a mystery for 74 years. The only clues, a torn phrase from Persian poetry, and a coded message that continues to baffle cryptographers. In this video, we'll follow the remarkable journey that finally identified him as Carl Webb, an electrical engineer whose DNA revealed what time had concealed. Yet, identification raises more questions than it answers. What circumstances brought Webb to that fateful beach? Why were his personal effects so meticulously removed? And the question that haunts investigators to this day, did he die from natural causes, or was something more sinister at play? The haunting mystery began as dawn approached on a summer morning in Australia. On December 1st, 1948, a jogger made a disturbing discovery at Somerton Beach in Adelaide. A well-dressed man lying motionless against the seawall. Initially mistaken for someone who had simply fallen asleep, the grim reality quickly became apparent. The man was dead, his body positioned in an oddly formal manner, with his legs crossed at the ankles and his head resting against the wall as if carefully placed. A partially smoked cigarette remained on his collar, its ash barely disturbed by the gentle morning breeze, while the rhythmic sound of waves crashed in the background. Investigators were immediately perplexed by the man's carefully constructed anonymity. Every identifier had been systematically eliminated, clothing labels meticulously removed, pockets emptied of personal effects, leaving authorities with a body devoid of history. Witnesses later reported observing a man matching his description at the same location the previous evening, raising troubling questions about how long he had remained there before death claimed him. The subsequent autopsy transformed the case from unusual to genuinely baffling. Medical examiners encountered a paradoxical scene, a body without visible trauma, yet unquestionably deceased. The pathologist noted subtle physiological indicators consistent with poisoning, unusual congestion in certain organs, and an enlarged spleen. However, comprehensive toxicology tests detected no known toxins, leaving medical science unable to explain the precise mechanism of death. The investigation shifted when authorities discovered an abandoned suitcase at Adelaide railway station containing clothing and toiletries matching the Somerton Man's possessions. This potential breakthrough ultimately reinforced the pattern of deliberate anonymity. Nearly all identifying markers had been eliminated, with precision suggesting either meticulous planning or professional training. The first genuine breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A tiny pocket sewn into the man's trousers contained a small scrap of paper bearing the Persian phrase Tamám Shud, meaning, "It is finished." This cryptic message redirected the investigation entirely, eventually leading to a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, containing an undeciphered code inscribed in its back cover. This sequence of seemingly random letters has confounded cryptographers and intelligence experts for decades. Despite publishing the autopsy photograph in newspapers across Australia, an unusual step demonstrating the authorities' desperation, not a single person claimed knowledge of his identity. The Somerton Man was finally laid to rest in Adelaide's West Terrace Cemetery, his gravestone bearing only the words, "Unknown Man," his deliberate anonymity remaining impenetrable for over 7 decades. As that nameless grave was filled in Adelaide's cemetery, intelligence agencies worldwide may have been tracking developments with keen interest. The coded message discovered in the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam represented a potential intelligence goldmine that had successfully resisted every attempt at decryption. Like a puzzle locked behind layers of time and secrecy, This sequence of letters continues to baffle military cryptographers and civilian code enthusiasts alike, despite decades of scrutiny with increasingly sophisticated methods. The timing of this enigmatic death aligned perfectly with growing Cold War tensions. In 1948, as the first frost of East-West conflict settled across the globe, Australia occupied a uniquely valuable position in Western intelligence gathering. The Woomera Rocket Range, Australia's cutting-edge weapons testing facility, represented precisely the kind of military asset that would attract Soviet intelligence operations. An unidentifiable corpse with methodically erased identity markers appearing near a sensitive military installation created the perfect breeding ground for espionage theories. A tantalizing subplot emerged when investigators discovered a woman living near Somerton Beach with an unexpected connection to the case. Known only by the pseudonym Jestin, this nurse had previously given a copy of the Rubaiyat to a man during wartime. When presented with a plaster cast of the deceased's face, witnesses reported that Jestin exhibited unmistakable shock, though she steadfastly denied recognizing him. Her family maintained extraordinary privacy after her passing, intensifying speculation about what secrets she might have carried to her grave. The Somerton Man's physical attributes further supported intelligence theories. His unusually developed calf muscles resembled those of ballet dancers or specific military personnel, individuals requiring exceptional lower leg strength. Dental examinations revealed work considered atypical for Australian dentistry of that era, suggesting foreign origins consistent with an international operative far from home. Most telling was the systematic removal of identification from his clothing, a calculated approach consistent with established tradecraft among intelligence agencies. Alternative theories emerged in the absence of conclusive evidence. Some investigators proposed black market connections, others suggested he was among Europe's displaced persons, explaining both unusual dental work and isolation. A more intimate theory proposed he was simply a spurned lover who traveled to confront Jestin before taking his own life. Yet the espionage theory endured as the most compelling explanation, encompassing the broadest range of unusual elements. The connection between the Somerton Man and Jestin remained particularly intriguing, with many investigators convinced she recognized the dead man, but chose to keep that knowledge secret. What dangerous relationship might have existed between them in the tense geopolitical landscape of 1948? Enjoying this story so far? Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to keep up to date with our uploads. The elegant spy theories that shrouded the Somerton Man for 7 decades were about to collide with something far more powerful than speculation: genetic certainty. After 74 years of nameless existence, the most sophisticated DNA techniques would finally extract his identity from the shadows, revealing a truth that challenged everything investigators thought they knew about this mysterious figure. The pivotal breakthrough emerged through the determined efforts of Professor Derek Abbott from the University of Adelaide. The key to unlocking the mystery had been preserved since 1948 in an unlikely form: microscopic strands of hair embedded in the plaster cast of the Somerton Man's face. This seemingly insignificant biological material, protected from contamination and degradation for over 7 decades, contained the genetic blueprint that would finally give the nameless man his identity back. In 2022, Abbott joined forces with renowned genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, combining his scientific expertise with her mastery of genetic genealogy. Together, they extracted viable DNA from those preserved hairs, a remarkable feat considering the age and condition of the sample. This genetic material became the foundation for their groundbreaking analysis. The process was painstaking, Using sophisticated genetic genealogy techniques, Abbott and Fitzpatrick meticulously constructed an extensive family tree, following genetic branches and connections that had remained invisible to previous investigators. The DNA whispered secrets across time, gradually revealing ancestral links and family connections that had been lost to history. When the final piece fell into place, the revelation was stunning in its ordinariness. The Somerton Man was Carl Charles Webb, born in 1905 in Melbourne. Not a foreign agent or trained operative, but an electrical engineer and instrument maker whose life had taken a mysterious turn in his final days. The identification of Webb as the Somerton Man delivered a profound shock to those who had built elaborate theories around international espionage. The discovered truth stood in stark contrast to decades of speculation about clandestine operations and Cold War machinations. The man whose death had inspired complex narratives of spy networks and secret codes was, in reality, an Australian electrical engineer whose life had veered into obscurity. Further investigation into Webb's background revealed personal circumstances that might explain aspects of the mystery. He had separated from his wife shortly before his death, a potential emotional catalyst for his journey to Adelaide. Moreover, Webb had seemingly vanished without informing his family of his whereabouts, suggesting a deliberate withdrawal from his previous life rather than a calculated espionage operation. The DNA identification solved the central question of the case, while simultaneously undermining virtually every theory that had developed over 7 decades. It was as if the mystery had been hiding in plain sight all along, obscured not by sophisticated deception, but by the limitations of mid-20th century forensic science and the passage of time. The unmasking of Carl Webb after 7 decades created a peculiar paradox in the Somerton Man case. Rather than closing this chapter of Australian mystery, his identification only deepened the enigma in unexpected ways. The most haunting question remains what exactly ended Carl Webb's life that December night in 1948. The original pathologist suspected poisoning, yet the toxicology tests available at the time detected no known toxins. Modern forensic techniques might reveal what 1940s technology missed, potentially unlocking this fundamental ambiguity between murder, suicide, and natural causes. This uncertainty forms the foundation upon which all other theories must be built. Webb's journey to Adelaide represents a profound geographical displacement from his established life in Melbourne. Records confirm his professional career as an electrical engineer in Melbourne, with no documented connections to Adelaide through work or family. This displacement suggests deeply personal motivations, perhaps a clandestine romantic entanglement, or an attempt to create physical distance from his recent marital separation, his soul seeking refuge far from familiar surroundings. The mysterious code found in the Rubaiyat book has transformed from suspected espionage cipher to something potentially more mundane yet equally puzzling. With Webb's profession now known, experts examine whether these letters might represent electrical formulas, engineering calculations, or personal shorthand notation, professional remnants of his everyday life rather than secret communications. Despite this new context, the code remains stubbornly undeciphered. The methodical removal of identification from Webb's clothing appears strikingly inconsistent with his ordinary professional identity. This careful self-obliteration suggests profound psychological distress, a deliberate final statement by a man perhaps overwhelmed by personal demons. Webb's identification has dramatically shifted the theoretical framework from international intrigue to personal tragedy. His recent marital separation paints a portrait of a man potentially adrift in emotional turmoil, his final journey perhaps an attempt to escape inner pain. Was he fleeing a failed marriage, seeking anonymity in his final moments, suffering from undiagnosed mental health issues, creating a deliberate enigma as his final act? The mystery now centers not on who he was, but why this ordinary electrical engineer chose such an extraordinary end, alone, unnamed, on a distant beach, leaving behind a puzzle that would captivate Australia for more than 70 years. The power of DNA technology has revolutionized not just the Somerton Man case, but countless historical enigmas worldwide. Much like how Carl Webb's identity emerged from the shadows after 7 decades, other nameless figures have reclaimed their stories through similar scientific breakthroughs. The identification of victims from the September 11th attacks and the capture of the Golden State Killer stand as testament to forensic science's transformative potential. Yet the limitations of this technology demand acknowledgement. DNA evidence, for all its power, remains vulnerable to contamination, and the interpretation of genetic data often presents formidable challenges for investigators. These scientific hurdles remind us that while we may uncover names, the complete truth behind a person's final moments frequently remains elusive. The conclusion of Webb's story isn't merely about scientific triumph, it's about the persistence of mystery despite our technological advances. As forensic capabilities continue to evolve, we stand at the threshold of resolving countless other historical puzzles. Today's unsolvable cases may simply be waiting for tomorrow's scientific breakthroughs. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. Share your thoughts on this case in the comments below, and what stories you'd like to hear. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on to keep up with our videos. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, stay intrigued, stay curious,